So Alex Oconor asked Jordan Peterson about his faith, and you're not going to believe what happened. But before we get into that, my name is Elijah, and I make videos about faith that engages the culture for Jesus. So let's get right into the video.
You don't have to extend Dawkins' work very far to understand that religious stories are memes.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a hierarchy of memes, and some of them are very functional.
But then here's the thing, like that frustration that you're sort of throwing in that direction, I think people throw towards you when you say, well, religion, you don't have to look very far to see that religion is a meme. Well, without further clarification, and of course there's going to be it, you can understand why to somebody first listening, that sounds almost atheistic, or religion is a meme. No,
right? Religion
is not a true historical account of, the history of the universe.
It's not a true historical account.
It's a meme. Now, when you say that the resurrection of Jesus.
Well, what does it mean historically that the Spirit of God brooded upon the primordial waters? Like, what does that mean historically?
Well,
no one knows.
I agree.
What that means historically.
I don't think that at least most of Genesis or parts of Genesis are supposed to be. I mean, the Bible is a library, right? It's not a book, and that means that it's going to contain different genres.
That's for sure.
And so when I read,
and some of them are more historically accurate, and some of them tilt more towards that kind of elusive. I don't mean elusive I mean ALLUSIV.
Elusive, yeah, sure.
Right? That elusive and symbolic form that characterizes Genesis 1.
So because there are different genres here.
When reading the Bible, it's not all in the same genre. Some of them are literally poems. Some of them are trying to be historical evidence. Some of them are trying to be letters to certain people groups. And some of them are just supposed to be songs and praises. And not all of them are commands for you to follow. That's also very important. What they're getting at is very interesting.
Christianity, and if you aren't comfortable committing to a historical ideal, you'll start talking about the Spirit moving over the face of the waters, which is obviously a much more mythological ideal, and not quite equivocating them, but moving between them too quickly and not delineating them enough. So if I asked you, do you think that the Spirit moved across the face of the waters, and you said to me something like, I think it's still happening.
Right, that is what I would say.
I'd say, hey, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense.
It always happens. It happened at the beginning of time, and it's always happening.
When somebody says, did the Exodus story happen? Did the Jews enslaved in Egypt break free of their slavery and move to the Promised Land across the desert for 40 years? Did that happen? You have also said, of the Exodus specifically, it's still happening.
Yes.
Now, to me, that's far more inappropriate than saying that the Spirit is still moving across the face of the waters. Because I think what people mean there is, do you believe that these people in that time period actually did this in such a way that, for instance, might show up in an archaeological report?
Well, I think that's the simplest answer to that is probably.
Sure, and that's fine too, but
we don't know.
Well, it's likely it did. It probably did happen. Or I would lean definitely. So yes, it did happen. And pretty good reason to believe that it did happen. And why not believe that Moses did lead the Israelites to the Promised Land, and it took them 40 years because they were stubborn and they didn't want to trust in God and rely on Him because they were complaining.
There is, to the degree that there's been archaeological investigations into the kinds of biblical narratives that you've described, the archaeological evidence tends to fall on the side of historical accuracy in relationship to the Bible, quite surprisingly often.
Right, exactly. Like what you're saying. There's a lot of archaeological evidences to prove, most likely what the Bible said was true, because they found things that was reliable to the Bible. They didn't find anything that was opposite to the Bible. That is 100% true.
You spent more time in Exodus than probably any person I've ever met in person, right? Clearly the story sort of captivates you and you think it's really important and can teach us a lot, right?
Yeah,
of course.
It's infinitely deep story.
I think most people speaking to you already know that you think that, right? And so when they ask you a question, when they suddenly say to you, but do you think it really happened?
Well, what the hell does that mean?
You must know that what they mean is what I was talking about a second ago, which is that sort of...
What? Okay, so fine. So it's easy just to turn this around. It's like, okay, what exactly happened in your historical account when Moses encountered the burning bush?
I don't need to know exactly what happened. What I need to know is
I'm not asking you specifically
I know.
Or attacking you for that.
What I need to know is that if I sort of went to the Egyptian desert at sort of the time that this story is alleged to have taken place in history, would I see a mass movement of Israelites from Egypt into the Promised Land? Would I see people with feet walking through the desert, leaving footprints?
Well, let's take it apart rationally. So,
but you also understand that when someone's asking that, and you like, even if you don't like the question, you must understand what someone's asking.
oh yes,
there.
well,
And if that's the
I
case,
understand many of the things that they're doing simultaneously.
then you must also understand that when you then say it's still happening.
It's funny, it seems like he doesn't want to answer the question, but also when he says it's still happening, I think that's also kind of true, because there's so many symbolic things happening in the Exodus story, like symbolic of the snake on the cross, and they had to look at it, and whoever looked at it would be healed, just like whoever looked at Jesus pretty much, or whoever believes in Jesus will be saved from their sins. They'll be healed from their suffering and their pain, which is their sin. And there's so many consequences to complaining and not relying on God. That's another consequence that we have to learn and understand from Exodus with it, which is happening in the Bible, which is very important. So it could be still happening, how we can learn and understand, but I still think it's a historical evidence, because that's how God works.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, I would say that's not my problem.
But it becomes a problem when you understand that someone's asking a quite banal historical question.
Well, yeah, but you don't get to do that
But why not?
because the stories that you're dealing with aren't banal.
I agree, but like one.
So you can't reduce them to something
One
banal,
compar-
even if it's what would you call it? Even if it's reassuring. This actually happened. Then what do you do with the burning bush?
So
this actually happened.
One comparison I would make is between this and talking about fiction more broadly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you got it right earlier. I would say you noted that the stories in the biblical library leap across genres.
Yes.
Right. Well, we know this because sometimes they're poetry and sometimes they're song.
Epistles,
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
and so in any given story, there's going to be historical account plus mythological overlay, and you have to be a discriminating reader to kind of see what's different, and you don't just get to say, well, all the mythological symbolism is historical reality.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not.
But here's the thing, for example. So like take a piece of trivial fiction like Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Right? We say like, okay, did that happen? Now, I think that what you'd probably say is something like, well, I don't think the events literally occurred, but I think that they obviously get at something that's sort of perennially true about human nature.
Exactly.
But then suppose I said
That's
to you,
right.
but
So
hold on,
they happened, they exist.
But there's a scene in Forrest Gump when, I think he meets the president. Is it JFK at the time? I think he goes and meets John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And so I said to you, well, is JFK the like that specific part of that story? Is it true that JFK was the president?
Right.
And you would probably just say, yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say anything more complicated. And even though the subject as a whole of like, is Forrest Gump true? Is Hamlet true? That's a complicated question.
Very.
But specifically, when I say, but interestingly, there's this little point I want to make in this broader discussion. Do you think that JFK was actually the president? You would say yes.
Why do you think it matters to people? Like, I don't know. These are ancient accounts. Let's say
maybe that's the biggest problem. Maybe that's the biggest.
It matters so much to people because they base their whole life off of this one thing, and if it's true. So if it is true, it matters to the extent that their whole life depends on if it is true or not.
Problem that you have with the people who are asking these questions.
It is. And like, hopefully, what point are you trying to make here? So the point is, I know what the point usually is the people who are asking the question believe that true unerringly means objectively happened in history, like the things that we're seeing right now happen.
Yep.
It's like, well, no, that's not what those stories are like.
For me,
some of it is, but
for a Christian, when asking you that, it's probably because for them they have an understanding of Christianity that requires believing in that kind of truth. For me,
and the
reason why I hope that like me asking these questions will be less frustrating to you is because I have no desire for that. I don't care about that. I'm genuinely just interested in what you think.
Yeah, understood.
My desire to know whether you think Exodus historically happened goes no further than a point of interest about your beliefs.
Well, so there's elements of especially the setup to the Exodus story that strike me as very, very plausible historically. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the Jews before the Pharaoh of that time were under the guidance and protection of Joseph and the previous Pharaoh. And they regarded the Israelites as benefactors. because Joseph had helped save the kingdom and his people were welcome. But that was forgotten. And so the new Pharaoh and the new Egyptians regard the appallingly successful Jews as destructive interlopers, and they make them slaves. It's like, well, can you believe that? Well, it happens all the time.
Sure.
It's happening right now.
So it's very
sounds
to me
plausible.
that in this particular case, saying it's very plausible. It's like saying something like, well, yeah, it could have happened. I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
I
don't think anybody knows.
So when somebody asks, did the Exodus really happen? That word "really," when they say, like, if I just said
really is the crux.
If I said, did the Exodus happen? And I'd understand why you would then say, well, you've got to understand what kind of story this is. Fine.
Yes.
But then if somebody says, yeah, but did it really happen?
Well, which parts of it?
Even if they're not expressing it very well, like what they're getting at there is they're trying to emphasize the historicity. They're trying to say, yeah, but did it historically happen? Probably is what they mean by the word really there.
Right. But the thing is, it speaks of their, they have the problem is that Christians who ask that have a metaphysics that's not Christian.
There you have it. Jordan Peterson answered to, did the Exodus really happen? Does he believe that the things in the Bible actually happen? And the answer is probably to some of the things. And I don't know if he really got down deep to what actually happened and if what he actually believes, but the deeper meaning is like he believes that it has a place and a purpose. I agree with that, but I think it actually really happened. So there you have it. Love you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I want to know your comments down below, good or bad, whatever it is. I love to hear them. Thank you guys.